Hey, good morning. Shabbat Shalom. H.L. Ginsburg was one of the greatest Bible scholars of the 20th century. He taught at the Jewish Theological Seminary for many decades. And he was actually so prominent a Bible scholar that he was a consultant on the movie The Ten Commandments in the 1950s. If you make it all the way to the end and you watch the credits, you'll see the name H.L. Ginsburg come up. He was so proficient in biblical studies that JTS didn't allow him to chant Haftorah. And the reason they didn't allow him is that he chanted it with his corrections. He said, nah, this can't be right. I found the original, whatever it was. So they're like, thank you, HL, for your service. Have a seat. We're just not going to let you do that. We're doing what we do. But one of H.L. Ginsburg's greatest accomplishments was cracking the language of Akkadian. Akkad was an ancient civilization in Mesopotamia, very near the land of Israel. It's modern-day Iraq. Assyria was all part of it. And he cracked the language of Akkadian that was found on some tablets. And this is only going back to the 1960s, 1970s. They'd had these tablets for a little while, but they didn't really know what they said until H.L. Ginsburg found them. And one of the things that these Akkadian tablets have is the legend of Sargon. Sargon was a ruler of Assyria in the 3rd millennium before the Common Era. And it talks about how Sargon was actually floated down a river in an ark, and that he lived for 20,000 years. What was so important about this discovery was that it helped explain some of the strange ages that people live in the Torah, in the beginning of the Torah, through the book of Noah. People are living for 1,000 years, 900 years, 800 years. And what the tablets of Sargon indicated is that it was traditional in the entire Middle East at the time to divide mythic time from actual time by having extremely long ages of the characters during mythic time, and then the more normal ages of the people in what we would consider more like historical time. What this means is that in the Torah, everything from Noah and earlier is meant to be taken as a myth or a parable. The Torah itself is saying by these exaggerated ages that you're not supposed to take literally what is happening at that time. The story of creation in the first chapter of the book of Genesis is not to be a guide to science on how things were created. It's about the relationship between God and the world. The second chapter with Adam and Eve is really about the relationship between human beings and the relationship between human beings and God. It wasn't meant to be taken literally right from the beginning. If you tried to figure out how all the pieces work and the ages, it's just going to upset you. You'll never resolve it. And it was never meant to be taken literally. It was meant to be an explanation of how human beings relate to each other, how human beings relate to God and the world. What's interesting, though, is the shift in the Torah from the mythological age to the more, let's say, historical age. And that comes at the story of the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel is the shifting point in ages between the mythological and the historical, between people living for 1,000 years. Now again, it says Abraham lived 175, but he had a kid at 100, so he had to really kind of work out and eat fiber and keep going. So 175 is probably a little exaggerated, but probably not completely. The shift again is the Tower of Babel, where people turned on each other, where some people put themselves above other people were excluded, and as I mentioned before, the extreme misuse of technology. Using technology to advance some people, but not to advance other people. That's the shift. And there's a very interesting observation here where it talks about the ancestors of Shem, who was one of the 3 sons of Noah. And one of these ancestors is known as Aver. And Aver, it's the same letters, Ayin, Bet, Resh, as Ivri, as Hebrew. And his son is named Peleg, which is named a dividing. It's named a split, and it's at that moment where the ages of people go down significantly. And what our sages and our commentators have said is that the reason the ages of the people went down is because how incredibly divided they became. That they were no longer working together, they were no longer helping each other, that some people thought that they were better than other people. And what this is saying is that that's a really unhealthy way to live. If you want to live longer, or at least have the years you have feel more significant, feel happier, it's connecting to people. It's being with people, not above or trying to keep people down or trying to exclude them. It's by sharing, not just by holding on more deeply. One of the things that was interesting to observe last year as COVID was really ramping up, and nobody knew what it was or what to do, and there were all sorts of panic buying in the stores, right? And like toilet paper, if you weren't first out the door, it was bad. But there were 2 kinds of approaches that I found really interesting. The people who said, there's a shortage, I better grab all I can. And the others who said, there's a shortage, I will just take what I need. And what the Torah is suggesting is that the people who said, I only take what I need, wound up doing better and being happier than the ones who said, I can take all that I can get. And this then helps us understand why Aver becomes so important to the Jewish people, why we're really descended from Aver when we call ourselves Hebrews. Abraham calls himself a Hebrew, but he was just a descendant of that line. And the person actually who really explained why it was Aver who was the one who becomes our ancestor was actually through a 13th century Muslim historian named Abu al-Fida. And what Abu al-Fida said is that the greatness of Aver is that he was the only one who refused to help with the building of the Tower of Babel. He was the only one who said, this is a really bad idea. And that's why his lineage survived. It's why, and this is even, Abu al-Fida says, this is why the original human language was in fact Hebrew, named after Aver. Everyone else's language was dispersed, but Aver's remained intact. And I think it's amazing that we are here today and our service is in the language of thousands and thousands of years ago. And the reason for that is because we've adapted the idea as a people of we don't just look out for ourselves. We do look out for other people. We stand up for other people, even if they don't stand up for us. Right? It is not reciprocal. And that's not why we do it. We do things because they're the right things to do. We don't do it because we expect everyone else to do things for us. It would be nice. It ain't going to happen. But we're here. Right? We expanded the tent. We have not put ourselves above other people. We have tried to be with other people. And so many of those other peoples over the millennia who stood against us or did not stand up for us, they're not here, and here we are. So let us be proud that we are the descendants of Aver. No matter how we became part of the people, whether born into or whether we joined, we're the people who refuse to say that the way to happiness is by putting other people down. Shabbat Shalom.